live, of course, on GTV. We are streaming this live across our social media platforms. You need to follow GTV Ghana across all the social media platforms. And let's bring this conversation to your homes and share with your friends as well. This time, at this side of the breakfast table, we are talking petroleum and the sector and its contribution to revenue generation and to national development in general cannot be overstated. It goes also without saying that for a while now, citizens have had to ask a lot of questions about our drilling activities and what's happening in our national waters. Are we discovering any more oil? And the question many Ghanaians want an answer to: how do these deep sea activities affect the petroleum activities downstream? So it's a flow down from up to down, but we usually concentrate more on the down than the up. So we want to understand what happens upstream a bit better. And who better to ask than the CEO of the Ghana Upstream Petroleum Chamber? I won't say former broadcast journalist, still a broadcast journalist, philanthropist, and social entrepreneur, one-time host of Time with David, interviewed iconic members of society like Nelson Mandela and Nijoma, and the list is endless. Worked with the CNN and been there and done it all. He started right here at GBC. This studio used to be his home, and today we welcome back one of our own, David Ampofo. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's I've got goose pimples sitting in here. I remember this place so well.
What memories come to mind?
Oh, too many. I remember sitting in here with, at that time, it was the big interview with Thabo Mbeki before he became president. And he was with another panel. And I spent too much time, he was with two other people, it was a panel. I spent too much time talking to the other two, and he was very upset at it. So why did you bring me here?
Just to come and ignore
Just to come and ignore me. You know, but it's extraordinary. I have many memories of GTV.
From 1986 to
86,
92 is a long
86.
time to have
Yes.
spent with a state broadcaster.
Yes, I came here in 1986.
Don't ask how old I was in 1986. That is unfair to me. But we idolize people like you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you.
recognize what you have contributed. And your colleagues at GBC say hi to you. I can mention a few names, but they'll beat me. So
thank you so much. You are very kind.
Time with David.
Yeah. Time with David. We did 1,000 episodes.
1,000.
1,000 episodes. 1,006 episodes to be exact. But on and off over quite a period of time. So yeah, it was a long time.
Well, why did you stop? You started it with a vision. What was
I
that?
know. I mean, you know, after a while, you like to move on to other things. I just believe that
You were
that's
just ready
the
for a
way.
change.
It was just time for a change, and I moved on.
And so how did you end up in petroleum? You're a broadcaster,
It's
social
interesting.
entrepreneur. You've always
Yeah,
been into broadcasting and
yeah,
communications.
yeah.
And then you end up, what? Do you have an oil well somewhere? Did you discover oil in commercial quantities in your backyard?
Good
How
question.
did you become this person?
Good question. I mean, my role as the chief executive of the Petroleum Chamber, the chamber is like, the chamber most Ghanaians know is the Chamber of Mines. It's been around for 100 years or more. The Petroleum Chamber is only 3 years. I've been there just, you know, I joined the chamber in 2020 when COVID landed with a bang. That's when I joined the Petroleum Chamber. They wanted somebody to be an advocate for industry. The chamber is an association of the oil companies, international oil companies, local companies. You know, the industry has the international oil companies that are offshore, you know, exploring, drilling, and so on. Once they start production, you know, there's a whole, even before production, there's a whole value chain of activity. So there are many Ghanaian service companies that derive business from what's happening upstream. So essentially, the chamber represents the industry.
So we're saying upstream, but someone is sitting there and thinking, is this a river that is flowing?
Yeah, good question,
Is it
good question.
Busumpe or Busum?
You know,
is it Pra?
yeah.
Which river is this?
Yeah,
What's
well,
upstream and what's downstream?
That's such a good question. Upstream is really deep sea, you see, and all the west coast of Ghana, very deep, 3,000-4,000 years of water. They are drilling for oil. Gas. Oil comes with gas. That's what they call petroleum. Okay, so you've got upstream, which is where they are exploring, they are drilling and so on. You've got midstream before you get to downstream. Midstream is when transporting the product you find out, evacuating it. Downstream is finished products. That's why Ghanaians are very used to that, because that's been with us for a long time. The downstream side, trading in oil products, has been around for a long time. Upstream was only when we discovered oil in 2007 and began production in 2010. So it's more recent. Midstream, you've got Ghana gas and all that with processing. So it's there, it's growing. But we're all used to downstream because that's where the oil for gas comes in. I keep telling people, keep asking me, and I keep saying gold for oil. I keep saying, sorry, it's not in our purview. It belongs more downstream. So you're talking about oil that's imported. You're not talking about oil that's produced upstream. Okay, so we can, over time as a country, work hard to develop a better synergy, make sure that, ultimately when you're doing well, it's integrated and you are doing in all places. But the distinction is very important to make.
It's only in English language that upstream will actually mean in the ocean.
Indeed. I mean, I always have a joke. I always say upstream, rather, is down there, and then downstream is up here. It's indeed, but that's just the reality of it. It took me a while to adjust myself around it too,
I mean, communicators. I'm thinking upstream.
Yeah.
No, ocean. Okay, got
that
it.
tells me you're a communicator. No, straight away.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make. It's the first question I asked, but this is industry.
But here we are.
Industry.
And for Ghana, we've prided ourselves since at least 2007, being a commercial producer of oil and being an active player in the petroleum space worldwide. How are we doing?
Look, we could be doing a lot more. I'll be very honest with you. We could be doing more. The industry is not as vibrant at the moment as it could. I mean, if you take the discovery, Jubilee, in 2007, there was a major find. It was very exciting. I recall, all the big expectations, because we've been looking for oil for a long time, casting an eye next door and looking at our sister Nigeria with a little envy. They built a whole new capital from oil. So it tells you what the process can do. But you have to really put in place, and I know that government has made the efforts it has to make. I think it can do quite a bit more, if you ask me.
What haven't we done yet?
Well, I think one of the things that I think is, you have to ensure that the environment, the investment environment is sufficiently attractive. Because you see, you must understand that there are different countries. You're not the only country, if you like, with oil and gas. But investable resources are limited. Of late, it's even getting worse because of the energy transition, where there are some companies, some fund managers who are saying, let's oil and gas. It's a fossil fuel. Let's do green energy. So as those resources begin to even dry up over time, right now, because of the war in Ukraine, oil and gas is back on the table. So it's very easy to think that, it's there. But honestly, look at the trends. Over time, fossil fuels will go. It's not the first time there are energy transitions. History has been full of energy transitions. So what we really have that gives us a real plus is gas. We don't forget that fossil fuel is gas and oil, but gas is considered the cleaner of the fossil fuel, the preferred one. That's why they call it the transition fuel. And we have quite a bit of it. We should harness our gas. There must be major investment in infrastructure that allows you to evacuate it. The thing is in the bottom somewhere there. You really need pipelines and a whole range of things to transport it. It's capital intensive. There's a lot of money in doing this.
When we started this production commercial quantities, a lot of our gas was being and we put systems in place to try and bring that gas home. I remember conversations around the construction of the West Africa gas pipeline and then maintenance over the years. How much gas are we producing now?
Look, we are producing a decent, let me put it that way, without being specific, but it's been a decent amount of gas, enough. That's why I always say this way, for domestic consumption. That's why
for the whole country.
No question. Gas. Our part of the stability we have with our power plants, electricity, is because there's gas flowing. One of the ENI, which is a major investor here, working with Vitol and GNPC, because GNPC is a partner to every oil company, remember that, are producing substantial amounts of gas. Tullow, don't forget the Jubilee fields in 10, that's the first. They are also now beginning. In fact, the initial gas they even gave to the country free because of the petroleum agreement. They came for oil, then they find gas. But now they are also going to be sending gas in a commercial sense, meaning we pay for it. And so we have natural gas in good reserves. We need to find ways and means. And I think even now they're making, I think that Ghana Gas is actually planning to build additional plants so you can process even more. You know, we've done quite a bit with infrastructure. West Africa Gas Pipeline used to bring the gas all the way to the West Coast. Now that same pipeline can take the gas the other way around, because you see our resources are on the west, but a lot of the factories and stuff are on the east. That means Accra, Tema, and here the gas is maybe Takoradi, off Takoradi. So you need to convey it, bring it across. But we have work to do. We have work to do, you know, to make the climate more interesting. I still feel a little, as an industry working with the companies, I feel one of the concerns is, you know, government, I think, could collaborate a bit more with industry. Sometimes I worry about that. It's very easy to be on two different sides, but that really doesn't help, because you're both involved. You're in the same, you know, place. So the more you cooperate, you know, even government, when it's developing policies, it's doing policies for the sector, for the companies that are working there. The least you can do is work with them to understand what works. Otherwise, you end up with policy that really they don't respond to. You get a stalemate. Not much is happening. At the moment, there's a bit of a decline in our production, because remember that there was Jubilee and 10 Talo, but then ENI came in 2016. There's no other company. We're in 2023. Why is that? Why is there that there's no additional investment in there? We had a bit of an interruption with COVID in 2020, but even so,
even before that.
Even before that. Okay. And the price has gone up. It would be fantastic if we were producing a lot more, because they would benefit from the price that's gone up.
But do we have with in the reserve?
We do.
Because looking at the amount of monies that has gone into making sure we can even engage in with these partners to bring the oil up to the surface, have we received the corresponding availability of product? If not to use domestically, to sell, so we can get revenue and recoup some of the investments that we may have.
Well, remember that a big part of your revenue, also a decent amount of your revenue, maybe it comes to around 7% of GDP, a little under maybe $700 million a year comes from your oil. So it is, and a decent is an important contributor. The thing is that how much more it could do. I always say, remember that. You see, the trouble is that if you're not careful in absolute terms, when you take the sums, you may say, oh, we made a bit more money this year than last year. The truth is that you produce less, but you have probably made a bit more because the price
has gone up.
So can you imagine if you produce more and the price went up? So it's very important as a country we don't end up with stranded assets, meaning that we must have barrels of oil offshore in Ghana now. We are producing at the moment maybe 140,000 barrels per day. We could be doing a lot more. So it's important that we make the effort as a country, and that the government agencies that are responsible for this sector do all in their power to work with the companies to really make Ghana much more successful. We don't have too much time, in my view, because the truth is that you can say, oh, yeah, we'll be doing oil and gas for a while. But remember,
the world is moving on.
The world is moving on. So well said.
Is it, when we started oil exploration, we were fairly new at it. The local expertise, we were told, was not what it could have been. So we found ourselves taking a back seat and allowing our international partners to lead. Are we catching up? Is there a timeline, do you think, where we say that in the next couple of years or so, we could take over this space, if not entirely, the majority of?
Look, we can. There is no question about it. But you've got to be producing. You've got to be active. It's in the process of being active and doing stuff that you also learn. If the industry begins to get dormant, it's very difficult to even, all the talk even about local content. You know what I mean? I mean, that is the whole idea. I mean, local content can be quite a dormant thing if there's no activity. That is why I keep saying, for us at the Chamber, one of the things we really want to do is encourage a deepening of the engagement between government and the companies that belong to the Chamber. Because I do feel that there are still certain challenges. I mean, you know that there are one or two of our members, for example, that are even in arbitration at the moment with government. That it cannot be the most exciting thing for others. I mean, if you want to come to the place and you know those who are already, then you want to think twice before you do it. So we need to resolve some of these matters in the best way possible. Find a way to resolve them. Find a way to improve relationships. Find a way to share the vision and make sure that this natural resource delivers for the country. It has all the potential, but it's only potential, and you have to do something to realize it fully. Yeah.
I'm guessing at this point, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the challenges would be the fact that people have talked about our refinery for a long time, and it doesn't appear to have happened. Is it affecting us in any way, the fact that toll is not where it should be?
I mean, look, that is, again, remember, downstream. For the upstream sector, it is generating oil. That oil is getting sold on international markets. It would be wonderful if we had the kind of development that some of that oil went into a refinery, as you're saying, locally. But you see, that is not the case, because clearly it is not competitive enough. If it was, it would go there. But so you find us importing oil for toll.
Refined oil and exporting crude.
And exporting crude oil. So there are some connections in this that need, and government needs to think through, and with a strategic plan, find a way to improve these things. I mean, there's talk about building additional refineries here in the Western region. It's still very early days. But it's important that we are clear about that and what we want to do. Nigeria, Dangote has just built a massive refinery. And sometimes you need to move quick. You see, first, if you don't move too quickly and somebody moves ahead of you, then sometimes they take overhead. So we have to be clear about all these things. We have to think about the region and not just the country.
Is there an attempt then you mentioned Dangote, that for local players to whether come on board individually or to come together as a group to put up something like that, to say, we can finance this? We hear that Ghana has a lot of rich men. Are they putting those monies towards?
These are my dear Thelma, these are huge sums of money we are speaking about. I'll be honest with you. These are, and in any case, in this business, before you even talk about refining, I mean, let me talk a bit more about the upstream. When you go and sink a well, you want to drill to set for oil, you may spend $100-200 million and you come up with nothing. We don't want to use our public money, our money for those things. That's why we bring in partners. That's why you must look after them and work with them. We don't use our money for that. Who wants to go and spend when you can sort out hospitals and schools and so on, and you go and take a risk with it to go and say, I'm going to look for oil down there? You can't do that. That's why we always want private people with capital to do that. So you see, they also are looking for returns. We must understand that. You cannot, on the one hand, be happy to embrace them, and then on the other hand have a difficulty with them. You've got to find a win-win situation somehow. That's so important that Ghana does that it understands a win-win, that it does not treat foreign investors as though they were adversaries, as though they were they want something else other than us.
But when we sign a deal and a foreign partner gets 80% and Ghana gets 10, how is that?
Well,
how is that unfair to the business partner?
Well, it depends what you are looking at, because let's be honest, if you're going to spend X amount of money to do something, assuming you're going to spend $1 billion on it, if you can come up with 500 million, you can get 50%. If you can come up with 100 million and the thing is required is $1 billion, you have 10%. Do you understand me? So this is business. You have to understand that. And countries are developing partnerships. Okay, we're not the only countries that do these things. That's why I always say, look around you. And I always pray for that Ghana does a bit more of that. Take a look at what's happening elsewhere. How are they doing it? We can learn from others. They too can learn from us. Okay, but you can't be confined to your own space and expect magic to occur. I mean, I think it's in a way, I think it's unfair to assume that, the companies are there to take away and so on. I don't think it's fair. I think that this is the sort of thing where they make money as investors, they get their returns, the government makes the revenue that it deserves, and together you expand the sector, you grow the sector.
The controversies that have surrounded some of the deals for exploration, we've heard arguments in Parliament about the ACA and everything that comes with the upstream side of the petroleum. Does it affect the chamber in any way? And how do you navigate those waters to ensure confidence of Ghanaian in the leadership of those in the space?
Well, I mean, there is always a role for government. I mean, remember that this is an important sector. ACA, you mentioned, I mean, if it was producing oil by now, then it would mean we're even making more. For a variety of reasons, that is not the case as we speak. I know that the plan of development is delayed, and that is, but I know they're also working on it. But the truth is that we need to find a way to resolve, as I keep saying, whatever it is that holds it back.
What do you think is the way forward to resolving those?
Well, I think first of all, in the case of, for example, like ENI, which has with Envitor, who have a dispute like with Springfield and so on the unitization issues and all that. I think that there is room to removing things sometimes in a court environment and looking for, if you like, independent third-party arbiters. You know what I mean? Top quality. You both choose them. I mean, I'm not. You cannot solve a problem by going to bring an arbiter when one party doesn't feel comfortable with. But together identify that and find a way speaking to resolve these matters out of court. Because I keep saying to you, with an arbitration, it puts a different color on the thing altogether. And there are many people that panic when they see that. So we must find ways, and this is government's role, okay? But we as the chamber, representing the companies, are hoping increasingly this year the government will engage with us more. You see, we have to be seen as an institution that's there for the well-being of the industry, even if we represent the oil companies. Somebody must represent somebody. We cannot be seen, if you like, as an institution that because we represent the companies is on this side. That is part of the problem I'm describing. We have to understand that we must work together.
But then there must be an arbiter as well. And if it's taken from court, then how do the parties, resolve the differences?
I'm saying they must agree on an arbiter. I'm saying that I'm sure that if you agree, if you decide that you want to use a different approach to resolve it, you can. That's what I'm saying.
A different approach.
Yeah, you can.
Players point fingers at players in the upstream sector, and they say that the companies don't pay a fair share of taxes.
Yeah. Taxation is a big issue. Ghana, I mean, is in a difficult situation now, isn't it, as a country? And I know that it needs resources from everywhere. In the news recently, we see the difficulty they've had, even with a company like MTN. It's interesting to see that last week I hear that they've pulled back on it. That, I think, shows that you are looking to resolve matters. Is what I'm referring to. Taxation is always a big issue, but what happens is that if you don't find a way to tax fully, then you tend to focus on just a few prominent, high-profile players. It can be unfair. And remember that in petroleum, there's a whole range of agreements that have been signed. You have to work within those agreements. You can't sort of suddenly just pop up with a new tax because things are a bit tight. It doesn't work like that. I think that taxes in Ghana, taxation, we need to study Kenya and a few countries again who've done some really good work there. Expand the tax net. It's not a matter of taking more from the few you have. It's a matter of taking from the many, so that it's like they say, you find a way to increase it. There are a lot of loopholes in our taxation, let's be honest. I mean, everywhere you turn, whether it's a plumber, there's a lot of people benefiting from public services.
Are you collaborating with GRA to
we are
some of these?
Incidentally, it's funny you raised that, because that's one of the things we want as a chamber to bring the GRA, and they have a petroleum unit, and our members into a room, and you're right, and take our time to moderate a discussion. Let GRA explain when their view what they think so and so is. Listen to the companies, get the companies to hear what GRA thinks. You see, this is something that the chamber must do. We must continue to facilitate an interaction with government and government agencies that, in the end, does us all good.
So we're looking for more taxes. It's like everybody is asking for a share of one cake.
Yeah.
So the international oil companies are having to pay the taxes, yes, unfairness in some of the systems with loopholes. And the communities are also demanding their share, just like in the gold space, where mining communities are asking for a portion of the proceeds, the profits that the companies make, to be taken to them. There are conversations that went on in the Western region when the oil was discovered and the exploration began. Is this something that has continued? And where are we with making sure that these communities or the areas close to these offshore drilling places get the needed development and they become proper oil towns and proper oil cities.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, and I'm glad that you said the communities, you know, close to the offshore, because I was going to make a distinction between, if you like, the gold and the oil, and in the sense that the oil exploration is being done offshore. It's not on the land, so it's a slightly different sort of thing. It doesn't change the fact that there are, because it's offshore western region, there are thick coastal districts, key communities there who believe that they ought to benefit a bit more than others. Those are issues that we need even as a country to discuss. It's a tricky area, because you can have people start to say that, okay, the gold is in this area, so we want the towns around here to be the best. And so I found this here. But a resource, a natural resource, a national resource. And it really needs to,
it's for all of us.
It's for all of us. It's very important that we understand it like that. I think there are sometimes there are challenges here. Companies believe that they have paid taxes, they paid royalties, they've paid what it is that the agreements require them to do. Always remember, what does the agreement say? Once they do that, they feel like they've done what they need to do. Now, the recipient, which is government, if you like, of that revenue
then gets the responsibility.
Then has the responsibility to precisely to get to that. If you don't do that, you create a lot of confusion, because you see, it's always the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, you generate your income, you have certain expectations, you've agreed what you must pay.
So more and more it gets put into that corporate social responsibility space, because the companies feel like they have fulfilled their financial obligations to the government.
But forward-looking companies, make no mistake, many of them, forward-looking companies understand that the social license is very important. When you work in an area and you're doing things and the community is happy, it's in your interest as well. So I think responsibility, some call it corporate social investment, is important for many, big companies that, have access to resources to work in a given area. And we must encourage them. We at the Chamber, for example, must encourage them. Our members, for example, how are you doing on the CSR front? What's happening here? What's happening there? And encourage them also to do more. But we must understand what that is and situate it not as some obligatory thing. You see what I'm driving at. It's so important you make that distinction. The role of development for communities and so on is that of the government. The people must ask the government to do that. That's extremely important.
So when we discovered oil, and we talked about we could mine this for 25 years. Since it started, we still have almost the same number of players that have been in this space. Should we expect more? Are we still exploring more fields coming up?
Yeah, good question. There are quite a few discoveries. The truth is that you need to produce. It's one thing to discover, there's nothing to produce, and there is a need to think through what are the best ways to bring a lot of these discoveries online, so to speak. It must make commercial sense. You see, this is what always happens all the time. When you're producing offshore, sometimes you have what they call an FPSO, that big ship which produces and stores oil, and it's sitting here, and there are all kinds of things linked to it, and oil goes into it, and then we ship. I mean, as we go on, people are looking for other ways. Could you situate one here that serves 4 different people because maybe one particular company cannot afford it? We must be creative about what we do. But you are right. It's simply not, the best to think that, Tullow and Cosmos found oil. Cosmos with Tullow produced oil since 2010.
Will I be right in saying it's almost a monopoly?
It's really a monopoly because in 2016, ENI also came and found oil and gas. But what it means is that something is not happening. It's a bit stalled. If you look at the curve, you can see the production from 2010, you see it going up, you see it going up, you see it going up.
Now.
When ENI came in 2016, boom, it goes up again. Lovely. You see, now you can see it's dipping. You see what I mean? Because there's only so much, even the resources you have for those who are working now, over time the field is mature. It begins to diminish. So you need to bring in new resources all the time to keep production going. So we have work to do in that regard.
So we are talking upstream, but the obvious question, because you are CEO of the Chamber, perhaps you could pick your thoughts on something that's happening downstream. Government says it's going to, leverage, I use the word advisedly, some of our gold, exchange it, barter it for oil. Do you think that's a good idea?
It's really a question for minds, but even so, I hear you. Let me comment. Remember that you're talking about oil, processed oil that's coming from outside. You're not talking about, right? There's been a lot of pressure on our currency. It has been really, it collapsed literally against the dollar. I could see it to my mind where the thinking is coming from. Okay, and I'm choosing my words carefully. I'm not saying necessarily that I share the view. I'm saying I can see why they can arrive at a plan like that, even though it seems a little, to me, a little complex sometimes. When I think about it, I think really, is this the best way to do it? However, the idea behind it, just to help understand it, is remember that all these bulk distributors, all these companies that import oil, they all import with dollars. We forget, everything you buy from outside here, you use dollars. So I presume the idea is that rather than have them chasing dollars, and the more you chase dollars, demand and supply, the more the city collapses, let's find a way to prevent that. So instead of having them, paying them in dollars, let's give them gold rather. I don't know how sustainable it is over the long term. I don't know how they want to deal with it. All I know is that from the upstream point, we've been doing something that government requested. They basically said, look, can you keep some of your foreign exchange here? So our members are looking, they look at the operational budgets, and they decide that, what, let's keep it. So X amount of, I think last November and December, at least $17 million, came in here. So to enable us earn a bit more dollars. This is the big issue, to stop the city from sliding. So as I say, I know where the idea is coming from. I'm not entirely sure that it is the way to go.
Right. Let me pick your last thoughts, and perhaps you could tell us what the plans for the chamber are for 2023. 3 years old, quite a toddler, still finding your way. Yeah. But I'm sure you have big dreams.
All the time. I mean, I must say to you, talking about dreams, let me close my eyes and pray. Look, in all honesty, Thelma, if we as a chamber can really build a good, strong, healthy relationship between the companies that are here, are already doing the work, and the government, would have made great progress. It's one thing for government to go around the world saying it's looking for investors. That's fine. I always remind them there are some who have already come in here. Focus on them too.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure.
This is one-on-one with David.
This is time with David, you mean?
Literally, time with David.
I feel strange sitting on the other side. I feel like I should be
answering questions. I will answer your questions gladly. Massive love coming to you from our former director of television here at GBC, Mr. Moses Japon.
Oh.
And like I said, many of the people that you worked with,
tell them I love them all.
To say a big hello to
I love them all. I'm wearing long sleeves, so I can't show them.
Thank you for coming back home and for having this chat with us. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past 30 years or so, you know iconic broadcast journalist David Ampofo, communications expert and social entrepreneur. He's CEO of Channel 2 Communications. He's worked at GBC for years, from 1986 to 1992. Today, he serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Upstream Petroleum Chamber, and he's been sharing some thoughts about the upstream business with us right here on GTV Breakfast. Thank you once again for sitting with us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining the conversations. The Breakfast Show will continue right after this break. We'll be back.